This is a story from New York, not the New York of Manhattan, but from perhaps the toughest square mile in the city, in the South Bronx.
The South Bronx was dramatically different. Graffiti writing, it was part of the neighborhood.
I can remember when public transportation was one of the prides of New York. What's happened?
Whatever it is, street art or vandalism, it's costing millions to rub it off.
You simply had to get up.
After all, fame never dies.
And we were kids and we were running around stealing and robbing and writing on trains.
Lately, small graffiti scrawls have been replaced by what graffiti experts call grand masterpieces. But whether big or small, the words are rarely obscene or racial. Mostly it's just Mike this or Coco that. And these, it turns out, are the culprits' names or nicknames, and the numbers are usually the streets on which they live.
So the whole scenario of the tagging, writing movement changed with that super cool 223 bubble letter. So, but I went into that. I did my own version of bubble letters.
When you ride on the trains, a masterpiece shows how big you can, enlarge your writing skills and how fancy it would look, when you finish, and to let people know what it's like.
At that time when things were beginning, to actually see singlets develop into masterpieces in 72, when you saw singlets disappearing and masterpieces coming in, it was a slow process. It would take 3 to 6 months, but you have tens of thousands of teenagers all at the same time creating something from nothing, and you don't know how you're doing it, you don't know what's going to become or where it's going to go.
Now we're dealing with more like a little more aesthetic focused art type of thing, where it's not so much as you got around a lot, right? Your tag was in a lot of different places. You had the early signature era people. They were going out the scene. Number one, a lot of the taggers didn't like the fact that you had to use a whole can of paint to do these large bubble letter masterpieces. In fact, more than one can of paint, because you had to do the outline, the fill in, and then you had to do a trace with another color. And so that's, it might be like, involving maybe 2-3 cans of paint, as opposed to you can go into and rack maybe one can of paint, and you can get your tag in all 4 barrels with 1 can of paint. As a result of the whole writing graffiti phenomenon growing, not only were we actually tagging on the subway platforms after trains pulled into the stations, right? But now we're going to certain locations, specifically uptown in the Bronx, during non-rush hour, probably around about 6 o'clock. They would lay up, we call it layups, right? A train in the middle track that was considered to be the express track that the high rush hour trains would run through. These layups were usually in obscure stations and on off hours, mainly when it was starting to get dark, right? And that's where most of the trains, especially when it came to the masterpiece era, started to get the major tags or the masterpieces on them. Super Cool lived at uptown, 223rd Street in the Bronx, where a lot of these trains were laid up. So I always, in retrospect, I look back, I say that's why he was able to get up more frequent or noticeable on the sides of subway cars than the average rider, because he lived right where the layups were parked at.
It was a day I would never forget. An important method was about to be learned by me. It was around the year and summer season of 1973. I had ventured out on my own. I never liked tagging with anyone else, especially when I learned where all the layups, parked subways, and buses were. Going it alone also meant without my own brother, Staff161. The underground subway layups were good for when it was cold or raining, but those type of layups could be a serious trap when the police were trying to catch you. So on that summer day, I went to the 4-line layup in the Bronx, way uptown near Kingsbridge Road. It was about 4:30 a.m. and the sunlight was coming into bloom. I had been a good distance down the tracks of the multi-line layup of about 40 subway cars. I had already completed at least 3 nicely colored masterpieces of my All Drive 161 tag, when all of a sudden, it began to rain in a torrential downpour upon the tracks and the subway cars. I didn't panic. Frustrated at the downpour of rain, I said to myself, "Keep going, AJ, keep hitting." It was at that precise moment that I said the words "keep hitting" that I realized that the rain was hardly even touching the sides of the subway cars that I had been tagging. The reason being, the subway cars of the layups were on an angle, a curve, stretching down its aisle. But mostly, the rain was not hitting the sides of the subway car because of the direction that the wind was blowing. Wow, I said to myself, isn't this amazing? I can still continue on and tag out until completion. I finished several more masterpieces and went home to Hewitt Place, where I then lived, in the poor neighborhood of the South Bronx, and went to rest. The next time I had awoken, I thought back on my earlier adventure and the rain. What I always noted in my years of tagging at layups is that the police and many, if not practically all the riders, never like to be out in the rain, especially the police trying to catch a rider. Or in the case of those that were doing the tagging, they did not like to get wet just to get ahead. The police thought that the rain would deter vandals from going tagging, but not only were both the police and the scared wrong, but the rain, depending upon the direction the wind would be blowing, served to act as a complete cover against that element of Mother Nature ruining my masterpieces or tags. So from then on, I took advantage of those days when it would rain. There I would be, practically all the time, out there alone on some distant layup, bombing away and moving up to be one of the greatest geniuses and kings of graffiti. Instead of the old school record in which the lyrics said, "Rainy days and Mondays always get me down," I, All Jive 161, reversed the saying and instead stated silently, "Rainy days always got me up and helped me get around."
There's a school of libertarians which contends that graffiti is a popular art form, comparable to the work of prehistoric man in Neolithic caves. Most graffiti, though, is drawn not by young artists bursting to express themselves. It's done as an expression of contempt or defiance, an attempt to disrupt the orderly course of a social system they either don't understand or don't feel they are a part of.
Not every tagger was an artist. And graffiti writing was not necessarily motivated by art. Tacky 183, right, and Joe 182, they would tell you, right, that they're not artists. They wasn't tagging because they wanted to be some great artists or some great major person, some Michelangelo or some Picasso or something like that, right? This is something that came along later, progressively with the style thing. right? One of the major style persons, well, I call maybe really a style fanatic, was Phase 2. Phase 2, he was into this style thing. That's another major influence upon me. Phase 2 was a major style person. He was very influential in the way he did his masterpieces. The thing with Phase 2, he was the supervising or the leader of the Ex-Vandals crew, right? Which was another major early pioneer graffiti crew around the same time as the Ebony Dukes. GC was high point in the movement. Now, Phase 2 didn't live too far from us, right? Phase 2, Sweet Duke and Lee 163 and all these other dudes, they lived in the forest projects. So like 160, maybe, yeah, 163rd Street down the hill.
While we were here, a 14-year-old who signs himself Me 163, and indeed was in the process of leaving his signature when we arrived, finding still the ink stains on his fingers.
Somebody starts writing that somebody else, there's a better thing, nothing to do on the streets or nothing.
What started you doing it?
My friends started doing it, so I just went along with the rest of them.
You still doing it? Me 163 has been caught twice, but he voiced no regrets. It seems that teenagers see it as a way of getting back at a city they feel doesn't care about them.
I'd rather write on the wall and take drugs and stay out in the streets and everything, or go into a program or training home or something like that.
So Phase 2 was a major inspiration to me as far as his style thing. He was really into the whole style phenomenon. And so, me, I was more or less into how much I can get my tag around, how much I can get my tag noticed. That was mainly my main focus. But again, not every tagger, not every writer was into or had the ability to draw, but some did. I had a natural inclination to draw, right? I used to always draw stuff on my street. I was known for doing, we used to make these go-karts and stuff. So I used to, decorate the go-karts and so forth, with the spray paint that we had for the stolen bikes and everything. So I used to decorate go-karts. I used to design kites. We used to fly kites up on the roof, right? The tenement buildings that we lived in was right adjacent to Westchester Avenue, where the IRT-5 and the 2 trains to run, so we used to be on the roofs all the time flying kites, and we can see our tags running across the Westchester Avenue on the IRT 2 and 5 trains. Big motivation for the Ebony Duke crew, because being on the block and the IRT train 205 started to pull into Prospect Avenue, and as it pulled out of Prospect Avenue and coming down Westchester Avenue, right, it would pass Hewitt Place, and there would be our tags on that train. That was a big motivating factor for us to see. And everybody on the block, after a while, would get to know that was us, and we'd be like this cheering thing, and yo, look at that, that's nice, and there we go, our graffiti writing is going across in full blaze.
As we began to branch out and other guys joined up.
There were guys from the Ebony Dukes from back in the day, Hot Sauce 575, The Man 550, old stick letter writer from the very beginning of piecing. There was El Marco 174, who did the first El Marco car, which was doing as many single hits you could do, or tags. The kids say tags, I guess, in the 80s. As many as you could do on one car. You used to do hundreds of singlets on one car. And there was Nigga Charlie 170. Those were the guys that really pioneered everything, and they were really creative. I believe that Doc Cool and T Cool, who invented marshmallow letters, might have been in the Ebony Dukes also.
That was the first crew I was in, the Ebony Dukes. And I was so proud when he put me in. I never forget, when I was like 13 years old, 1971, I came up to Gun Hill Road and I met a fella named Staff161. He sold me a marker, a ninja. It was a ninja. He used to call it ninja back in the day. Ninja. I was like a pilot. And he put me in the Ebony Dukes, and he gave me a membership card. Boy, I wish I had that card today.
The end of 1972 into early 73, he and a half a dozen to a dozen other writers would come up to the Northeast Bronx above 180th Street, and they would recruit people to be in the Ebony Dukes. But when Staff161 showed up, he showed up dressed like Superfly, like Shaft, the way you saw the movies in the early 70s. I mean, dressed to the nines, double knit clothes, stitched shirts, Playboy shoes. And they would give you a laminated index card and ask you if you wanted to be in the Ebony Dukes because you got around enough to receive the honor to be in their group. And for me, that was the ultimate. So I did my first Marlin Blue top to bottom with a red outline in the end of 1972, and I put the Ebony Dukes single hit in the piece. It was, for me, it was such an honor. You simply had to get up. And if you got up enough and they were impressed with how much you got up and you had real creative style and real skills, you were able to get in. And that was so important for that time period because you wanted to be involved in something because there's no violence with the writers. You're just out there bombing, racking cans, and having a fun time. And if you didn't get up then, what was worse than being called a toy is to be in school and have somebody come over to you and have them call you a DGA. And the worst thing that you could ever hear was that, because DGA meant don't get around. And it was like the ultimate insult to say, you know, where you would practically just break down and cry to be a DGA. And either you became more of a DGA and a toy, or you went out there and you showed your stuff and you bombed. I showed my stuff and bombed, took over the line.
During this time, the writers' bench had been established. I believe phase 2 was a major factor in organizing. That's a very important factor in the whole movement because now we have this community of writers, right, taggers that come together socially and interact, you know, in fellowship and discuss and plan things. The location happened to have been 149th Street in Grand Concourse in the train station. On the downtown side of the platform towards the front, there was this one bench, and this one bench, we call it writers' bench as well, right? Because that one bench is where all the writers used to be congregate at there, and we call it benching to this day in the sense that, okay, the trains, the 2 and the 5 used to run there, and as the 2 and the 5 ran there, right, writers would point out their masterpieces. Look, oh, look, there's mine coming. I did that last night in the 4-yard.
You know, after you go, you know, after you're in the yards and you write your name on every train, like the day later when they come out, you just sit, you know, in the station the whole day and just watch your trains going by, different colors. Real nice.
That benching thing would be what was the main motivation, to sit there and watch your finished work go by, brag, and people see it and so forth, and pat you in the back and so forth, and also planning racking missions and other missions to go to the train yards and do hitting, or hitting is going to go and tag, right, and do masterpieces, hitting, right, and also the signed black books. Black books was like your souvenir or your mementos for famous writers that you would meet at writers' bench. Again, I had a natural ability to draw simple things, and as a factor in that, I would embellish my my bubble letters in these, like, you know, extra things, right? Not so much for art reasons, but mainly to draw attention to the tag. So I started to do like checkerboards, right? Backgrounds behind the, my bubble letters. I would do stars, and I would do dots and cross sections of different colors in the tag itself. A 3D background. One of the best 3D backgrounds, three-dimensional backgrounds that I ever seen on a masterpiece was Pistol. It was a phenomenal piece there. One of the more prolific early pieces that I did was the Grim Reaper piece. Now, the Grim Reaper piece came out of an inspiration for me, mainly to bring attention to the tag. I'm not thinking art. Seeing the character or the cult figure or image of the Grim Reaper represented death and the Death Angel, I came up with this concept to go to the layups, right? And to do this here masterpiece on the train that included the Grim Reaper on one side of the car, right? And my name in bubble letters in the middle, and then the other side of my masterpiece, or my name in bubble letters, I would do this little grave with this tombstone with a hand coming up out the grave in a spray can. That is considered the first character piece.
When I saw the Grim Reaper done by Staff161, I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw it on White Plains Road and Lydic Avenue, and I was so entranced by seeing that I took a photo of it. That was the most creative, innovative, amazing thing you saw in New York. That was unbelievable. I still get goosebumps looking at it. I mean, that's incredible. And a few weeks after that, I painted my snowman on a train, which was my first character.
The next one was the cannon piece. A cannon piece was composed of a stick figure that I drew on the side of a subway carriage, lighting a cannon and blowing my name out with flames and other stuff involved in it, stars and dots and so forth, and the Ebony Dukes, and then I wrote this statement, "Say boom," right? Okay, so this is the beginning of the character thing in the whole graffiti writing movement. Okay, this is 1973. I brought about those two early character pieces on a subway train in New York City. That cannon piece, something major happened with that kind of more or less is part of the writing folklore. My cannon piece surfaced with a defacement on it. It had a cross out on it, or some kind of mark that went through it. This caused uproar within the whole writing community, especially at Writers Bench there on 49th Street. It comes through, and you know, what happened to these pieces happened to have been a piece that everybody admired. It was a unique piece. It was the pioneer piece, and now it's defaced all of a sudden. How did this happen? Apparently, through some kind of information through the grapevine, it became understood that the person responsible for doing that was Death, who was this uptown writer. Now, the thing with Death, right, he was getting around, in the sense, on the train. You didn't see his tag around the city a lot, but he was what we call bombing meaning a lot of tags on the train, right? Masterpieces, nice large fill-ins of his tag, Death.
Death was kind of a wild Irish guy, and he went over Staff's piece. He did singlets or something through Staff's piece where the Saint Man was lighting the cannon, which was just ridiculous because the piece was so incredible, of a Saint Man lighting a cannon, shooting out your piece.
Well, here's the thing. There were enforcers at the writers' bench. One of the major, the enforcer at the writers' bench was Lionel 168. Lionel 168, he was a very big person. And the thing is that if you were charged with some kind of violation, meaning that you did something wrong in the writing world, then you had to face Lionel 168, and he didn't want to face Lionel. There's one story where it goes that the major graffiti buster of the time, one Officer Stephen Swartz, right? He was the only graffiti major, a cop that was around the vandal squad officer at the time, who basically busted some of the major taggers of the time, including myself coming out the Esplanade Tunnel uptown in the Bronx. He confronted Lionel 168 on a IRT train and was abruptly punched in the face. But anyway, that's another story. But anyway, so here we at Writer's Corner, and my cannon piece comes through and it's defaced. We as the Ebony Duke crew, we planning this little investigation into who this person is. The Ebony Dukes decide we're going to go to where they are. Later on, it's discovered through our investigations that they usually congregate at 180th Street uptown on the IRT 2 and 5 train station, 180th Street. So we go up there, we meet, I believe, Comet and Blade. Those are the first two, I believe, that we meet, and a few female writers at that. Kivu 1 and Z73, we meet them. All these writers, except Blade, happen to be white kids. The neighborhoods during that time were very segregated. A lot of gang activity, not just Black and Hispanic gangs. I mentioned all the gangs that I mentioned, the Savage Skulls, Savage Nomads, Black Spades, the Ghetto Brothers, Black Pearls, Roman Kings, the Bachelors, the Javelins, all these gangs, right? Tomahawks, Jolly Stompers from Brooklyn. All these gangs are mainly Black and Hispanic gangs, but people don't usually mention that a lot of these gangs were motivated or started as in a retaliation or answer to a lot of the white gangs that were very racially motivated. You had the Golden Guineas, right? And you had the Ministers. You had the Fordham Baldies. These are major white gangs that if you went into their neighborhood, right, and you were caught in their neighborhood, and I had a few incidences myself, right, you can get your lumps, right, being in their neighborhood, especially as a major tagger.
Because this is a white community, you know.
So here we go uptown, right? We're going uptown, 180th Street. Now 180th Street is basically the borderline between, let's say, the white gangs and the gangs of color, right? From 180th Street up, and from it's the white gangs, and from 180th Street on that train station down, going past Tremont Avenue downtown are the gangs of color. And apparently, they already know why we're coming up there. They arranged that I meet this writer, Death. Death happens to be a young Caucasian writer from that the Valley. The Valley is an area uptown in the Bronx, right? That happens to be a segregated white area that is a feared area for any person of color to go into that area. Here I am, I'm invited to go and to confront or talk to the writer Death about what happened to my piece. So I find myself in the backyard of this residential home in the Valley, and this thin white fella by the name of Death is there, and here I am, you know, confronting him, asking what happened to this my masterpiece with the cannon and so forth. And basically what I got from him is that it was an accident. Now, okay, now, as I said, accident, so how as he says it was in the tunnel. You have this Esplanade tunnel, right? It's a dark tunnel that is uptown on the 5 train, and it's layups that's parked in the tunnel. And this happens to be a major tagging spot for those uptown writers. I believe the story goes, according to Blade, that my cannon piece was parked in there, and it was dark, and somehow accidentally crossed it out, okay? So, or crossed or made a mark on it that he didn't want to make. According to him, he was willing to make amends by fixing it. He was going to catch it up there, fix it, and he was going to give me a couple of cans of paint to settle the dispute. I was surprised to see his mom comes out to the backyard. She has some tea and some biscuits for us, and it was a whole social thing ensued after that, and it was more or less the whole incident was squashed. Now, as a result of that, you know, confrontation type thing that was going to happen and so forth with the uptown Caucasian writers and the downtown writers of color, right? We kind of more or less made this treaty, right? That say, okay, you guys from uptown can become part of the Ebony Dukes, right? You can be our uptown division of the Ebony Dukes, starting with Comet and Blade, Vam, Crotchy, and even Death. The 2 female writers, the white female writers, Z73 and Kivu, became the early first white female writers of the Ebony Dukes crew, which is kind of ironic. People say, how can these writers be part of the Ebony Dukes? But that's another story. The Ebony Dukes is not about a racial thing, so to speak, right? And writing is not about a racial thing, right? And the whole movement is not about, what complexion I am or where I come from. It's more about me having a voice.
It didn't matter if you were black or white, you were down, period. And that was the most important. Graffiti wasn't about the color of your skin, it was about the creativity of your art.
When we were kids, it wasn't about white and black, you know? I mean, we were graffiti writers, man. I didn't see white and black. It was just, we were part of a family.
Originally, like I said, the Ebony Dukes wasn't really we call it a graffiti crew, but realistically, it was designed to be a family of brothers and sisters as well. It didn't matter if you were black, white, Hispanic, whatever. We didn't care as long as that you were loyal to our family.
That, I believe, is a major factor in why graffiti writing, right, as a youth movement, right, became a unifying factor between people of different ethnic, social, and racial backgrounds. I just have a certain amount of appreciation that the Ebony Dukes, you know, were a part of that, you know, helping to bring that about, you know. It was the beginning stages of, I would say, one of the expressive factors in, I would say, hip-hop culture. Hip-hop culture has to do with urban youth expressing themselves. You have to understand, there was a crossroads the urban youth came through. You have to understand, again, everything is time specific here. Late 60s, early 70s, and everything that was happening then had to do either with some kind of race issue, right? Some kind of gender issue, right? Or some kind of class issue.
A lot of shit going on in the 70s. You know, Vietnam War ended. The city was burning down. The South Bronx was burning down, you know. And Mayor Koch didn't give a shit about nothing, you know. The city was broke. And us guys, us graffiti writers, man, we went out there and bombed, you know.
The urban youth of that time, especially the youth between the ages of 8 and 16, had the burden of whether they were going to carry that on into the next generation of people.
New York was crazy back in the 70s, and we were kids and we were running around stealing and robbing and writing on trains, you know. We had to get out of the house, you know, the family house, and just escape and let it all out. And that's what we did,
But it was the best time of life because you're having fun, you're just going around racking up paint, making out with chicks, drinking Boone's Farm and Wild Irish Rose wine. And, you know, the city was literally your oyster. Mayor Lindsay couldn't do anything about it in the early 70s, and Mayor Beam couldn't do anything about it in the middle 70s, and Mayor Koch couldn't do anything about it for the writers that came along in the 80s.
Now, we had soul music, you know, and we had, one of the factors of me being attracted to the Ghetto Brothers, being a member of the Ghetto Brothers, was they had a Latin rock band that they will frequently do, you know, open jams, free open jams in the neighborhood, right? Later on, major writers like Kool Herc, he would get into emceeing and DJing, along with other major writers like Phase 2.
When Kool Herc gave a party, everybody be there.
Hip hop, writing on subway trains, rapping, it's all something that you feel. It's not something that you just do. You know what I'm saying? And those of us who really feel in our hearts, in our minds, and our souls, will continue to keep doing it.
I believe the urban youth brought about not only a change in visual art, but in dance and in music during this period, from the late 60s on through to the 80s. Most of the writers, the early writers, the pioneer writers, were between the ages of 8 and 16. 16 being the cutoff, because if you was apprehended by the powers that be tagging during that age group or that age period, then it wasn't too much that they could do with you because you were underage, considered a minor, and if anything, right, they would call your parents and your parents would come and get you, you know what I mean, smack you upside the head and take you home. Next day, you go and tag again, all right? So it wasn't too much consequences involved with tagging back then. So 16 being the cutoff, now I'm getting of age and it's time for me to start looking at what I should be doing other than tagging, right? So I believe I actually went up to the age of 17 and decided it was time for my exit. A couple of things involved my decision to do that. Besides my age, I believe the focus or the main purpose of tagging kind of more or less changed in direction, right? My thing was that the more your tag was around, right, the more you was considered a major writer, right? And you had to have a signature tag, a major signature tag, which was the whole root and foundation of the whole movement. So it started to change. It changed. It changed to like, oh, you have to have style. You gotta have these fancy large bubble letters. and what was referred to now, it started to be called wild style. Now, wild style I had no qualms with, other than the fact it was hard to read to the average person, the lay person or the novice. It's like, so I'm looking at it like, why use all this paint, right, to put on the side of a subway carriage and it's not readable? Mainly the answer to that was, it's about style. Okay.
Style and the theory of style and the presence of style and an appreciation for style is what I'm all about. I'm about letters, I'm about letter development. So yeah, I'm a style person. I do a lot of, drawings, characters every now and then, but I'm most happy when I'm doing letters. I'm feeling most creative when I'm doing letters, and I believe that the essence of true graph writing is individuals creating their own style and not copying per se. It's okay to be influenced. You're gonna be influenced, but you gotta put your own spin on it so that it's not recognizable, if you will. You know what I mean? You gotta turn it into a new animal.
Now, prior to my exit, a couple of things happened. Some of the present writers that were around during that period that I came in contact with, people like Fuzz One, right? Young writer that I met in the 4-yard, and Smiley 149, which was he was part of a savage nomad street gang in my neighborhood.
My experience with the Ebony Dukes is I was put in the Ebony Dukes by a good brother, man. Smiley 149. May he rest in peace. He was a good dude. He was a classy dude. He had his demons like the most of us, but 99%, Smiley was a good dude, man. And I miss him, and he's well missed by many others.
These writers, they're coming in now, right, in the piecing era, and they would go on, like writers like Blade and Comet and all these, they would go on from the late 70s on into the 80s tagging, right, which I didn't do, right? And they would carry on the legacy of what we call the Ebony Dukes GC.
I don't want to brag or nothing, but me and Blade took over the 2s and 5s for at least 10 years, and we destroyed that line. We did over 5,000 pieces,
I backed out, I say, in early 1975. It seemed like the establishment started to come in. Now, one thing about the Ebony Dukes, all right, GC, and is that we were basically anti-establishment. When I say anti-establishment, right, I always believed that graffiti writing, right, tagging was an underground movement and something that you didn't share with the general public. You had to stay anonymous, right? You had to not associate with the powers that be, and to make our secrets, you couldn't make our mode of operation known, right? You got major writers now that went on to do other things that got them long sentences in prison. You understand, this is a street thing. This graffiti writing wasn't something that kids from art school did in the beginning stages of this movement. Graffiti writing was basically a street thing, an outlawed thing, something that the underworld, so to speak, did. You understand that once you leave from the underworld thing, right, or the underground thing, and you carry it over to established organizations. When I say established organizations, people who are part of the press or people who are associated with the powers that be, then it ceases to be what it really and truly was meant to be. it becomes something a little more commercial, something that is a little more cooperative with the status quo or the powers that be. I believe graffiti writing had a dramatic effect as far as a youth voice. It had a dramatic influence in giving a voice to the voiceless. It made a statement that you can't alienate people to a certain part of the city, like the Fort Apache section of the South Bronx, and disenfranchise them and think they're going to stay quiet and not try to come out of that type of situation or fight their way out of that situation, even if it's through a spray can, or even if it's through a mark on a bus or the side of a subway car. That influence or that power, to me, ceased to become effective once the establishment comes in and starts to control it. Spray paint wasn't made to be a writing or artistic tool, but it became not only a writing tool, but also a major tool to give a voice to the voiceless. As Stay High 149 ingenuously put it, the voice of the ghetto. You had these organizations came in and decided that they're going to take the graffiti writers, and some graffiti writers went along, right, which is all right, and they established organizations and so forth, and it became major exhibits and such like that, and everything evolves.
This group is called Graffiti Artists United. They meet in the apartment of a sociology student who has encouraged them to go straight. Everyone who's a member has given up subways and public walls and has turned instead to canvas or paper or the sociology student's bathroom walls. Although these particular graffiti artists paint legit now, they still remember the good old days, last week or so.
Everything evolves, yes, but again, it ceased to be what it was intended to be. It ceased to be something of purity for those that had no voice. It ceased to be a voice for the voiceless. Now it becomes a commercial commodity.
In 1982, Henry Choffant and Martha Cooper, they were introducing us to go and do graffiti shows with Yaki Kornblitz's gallery in Amsterdam and the Fun Gallery in New York City with Patty Astor.
I think if you have something worthwhile to offer, you're going to outlast any trend. And that's one reason why I've always tried to, as I said again, just present this just as art.
I stopped painting trains in '84 because when Yaki Kornblitz came to New York, he saw the brand new pieces by myself and by Scene. And, he's explaining to us, morons, you can't do that anymore. You're international artists now in galleries, and you can't just run around in train yards and be crazy. And by 1984, I was almost 30, so of course, that's why I made the transition into doing artwork in galleries. And that was the best move ever, because not only did it force me to grow up, but it showed people how graffiti really is an art form and how that developed into graphic design that you see today.
I started writing in 1999. That was 15 years after graffiti was first introduced in Europe and Denmark. I was influenced by the pieces I would see taking the train from my city to Copenhagen. I would see pieces that I still can recall to this day. I would see especially one production by Moore, Sweat and Sape. That production was just amazing to me. I couldn't comprehend how these writers was able to do art like that in the night without permission. So that whole mystique of this culture, the whole secret identity of the writers really appealed to me, and I wanted to become part of that. Another wall I can remember was at the end of the same train line, and it was done by CMP, Sweat, Tech, and Dare. That was an amazing production. To this day, I think it's one of the best productions that I've ever seen in graffiti. Dare was from Switzerland, but it wasn't uncommon to see international writers in Denmark at that time, because back then graffiti was already a global phenomenon, and writers would travel the world and paint and meet with one another, and also the cruise was international at that time.
Back when I was in CPH Copenhagen, Denmark, I hadn't that much in my hand. I was broke. I was out of France with no job and nothing, but with the passion to the fullest in my heart. And I was roaming around because I was looking a lot at. I really love the Danish scene. I think they are amazing writers there since the 80s. I had not that much to do, no cans, no walls, and Paz, who saw me for the first time, he told me, "You're a writer." And I said, "Yes, I am, from south of France." And then he said, "Okay, I have those cans, and we can do a wall together. We can paint this wall together." And it was such a nice move. It was such, a hand, at me. And I will always remember this all my life. And ever since, I call Paz my brother. It's like that. He comes whenever he wants to my place.
So that unity of the culture is really the beauty of this. It doesn't matter where you're from, what color you are, what gender you are, social status, religion, none of that matters. It's just about the love of the culture and the love of painting. I've painted with writers all over the world, men and women, kids not big enough to hold the cans, and writers that are older than my parents. It's just peace, love, and unity, and having fun. Graffiti completely changed the way I view the world and my own place in it. This culture is really what gave me a sense of identity and pride of who I am and what I do. Over the years, my approach to graffiti and my focus in graffiti has changed several times. To begin with, I would do tags wherever I went, and that was the main focus, getting up and getting around. Today my focus is on styles and letters, energy and life. Fame doesn't appeal to me anymore. It's just about the joy of writing, and the time I spend with the people that I share this passion and love for the culture with.
And since that, we became very good friends, sharing the same definition of graffiti, which is for me pushing it in all kind of direction, and the shapes, the colors, and being true to the game.
Graffiti is all over the world. You can travel to Asia, Africa, South America, all over Europe, and you will see tags and pieces, all because of the actions taken by these kids and teenagers 50 years ago in New York.
Back in the days, I used to be not obsessed by my own definition, but I was trying so much to get the best out of me as a writer that I wasn't really aware of this background, and that it's super important to know the background, the roots of the culture.
I was invited to join the Ebony Dukes in 2012. becoming the first member outside of the USA. I really have no place in a historic crew and in that legacy, but I feel proud to help keep the name alive. Later on, we asked Esther from the south of France to join the crew, and recently Ralphie from Canada also joined.
So in 2013, he got me in the Ebony Dukes, and it was like just amazing for me to become a part of such a legendary graffiti clique. After that, in 2017, I went to NYC, where I met Staff161, and we did the wall together in the BX. He went here in south of France in last year, and we did some trackside together. He's like the soul brother number one. He has the true definition, and it's like relentless. He just keeps on representing all the time.
So to see Staff out there today in 2020, 50 years after it all started, that's just amazing to me. That we still have the presence of the first generations of writers. That's a unique time in history, and we have to appreciate and celebrate these pioneers that are still among us. Staff is still traveling, doing pieces. He has tags in all boroughs of New York. That's incredible.
been apple, but the cops were at. Shoot, letting street rats, another gang attack. Shoot, gotta protect your neck.